Buenos dias, Gunners Collective. Back at it like a smack at it. And as you can tell by today's thumbnail, yes, indeedy, I'm going to write some graffiti on this bus, right? We're going to get into it in a menudo style in a direct fashion. And I'm here, man, with a historian, a real Bay Area, Oakland historian, someone who's been doing this YouTube thing since the beginning of time, man. I'm talking about someone who was probably one of the first Latinos doing it here on YouTube and basically promoting, the unity and the canalismo and the cultura, So without further ado, man, I want to introduce none other than one Oakland Latinos United, man. How you doing, brother?
What's up, Gunner? Thanks for having me on here. This is Jose with Oakland Latinos United, tapping in on Gunners Collective.
Most definitely, man. I appreciate you. I'm just trying to live. So what I wanted to talk about, bros? I wanted to talk about some of the history of Oakland and how, how the Chicanos kind of gravitated into the gang scene, man, and the Nortenos. I know the Nortenos have always been prevalent in the city of Oakland. And I kind of wanted to touch basis if you can go through some of the history of Oakland, some of the older barrios, and how it all led up to that.
Well, as far as like the Chicano barrios and the Latino barrios of Oakland, it goes back to West Oakland. The first Latino Raza barrio in Oakland was in West Oakland off of 7th and Market, 7th and Clay Street. It went all the way down to about Jack London Square area. And that's where the Raza had came during the Mexican Revolution. And after that, during World War II, a lot of braceros came from Mexico, and a lot of people came from New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. And that was one of the first established barrios in Oakland. And a lot of the Pachucos had originated in that barrio. But then there was also pockets of raza in East Oakland as well, even though at that time East Oakland was mostly white.
Okay. And so I know Oakland has the history of the Brown Berets and several militant groups, the Black Panthers, and they've always been known to be it's always been a diverse city and, pretty militant, man. Can you give some of the brief breakdown history on maybe the Brown Berets and the Black Panthers?
Well, importantly, we got to understand that Oakland had a large migration of African Americans, and it's been viewed as a black town, even though Raza has always had a big, we've been there, we've had a presence there. And the Black Panthers did start in Oakland with Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale, and they were created as a means of protecting their community, particularly West Oakland and North Oakland, against police brutality from the Oakland police. At the same time, you had Chicanos in East Oakland. A Chicano had been murdered named Charles Pinky de Vaca, and after he got murdered, one of the first organizations mirrored itself after the Black Panthers, and they called themselves Latinos United for Justice. And that's where the name Oakland Latinos United came from. I named myself after them. And after that, you started having groups like the Brown Berets. They had originated in East LA, but they actually managed to start a chapter in Northern California, in Oakland. And also you had a group called the Chicano Revolutionary Party, and they were a Chicano group from Oakland, and they worked with the Black Panthers, and they did similar things: protect the community, protect people from police brutality, and do free breakfast programs. Very similar to what the Black Panthers were doing. And the Chicano movement, don't get it twisted, was big in Oakland. You know what I mean? They had a Chicano moratorium, the student walkouts. They had free breakfast programs. They created free clinics for the community. All that stuff was happening in Oakland, bro. But yet none of this is known.
Yeah. Everyone likes to focus on the negative without seeing the positive,
Exactly.
So me looking into the cultura and the history, I know there's a big name that was pretty prevalent, man, in uniting a lot of Chicanos. That was one Rodolfo Corky. Do you know his name?
Yeah, Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez. Actually,
exactly.
Believe it or not, the Chicano Revolutionary Party from Oakland was the group that was detailed for doing security for Corky Gonzalez when he came to Oakland. And when they had the Chicano moratorium in Oakland, Corky Gonzalez came to San Antonio Park in East Oakland and was part of that event. And that was an event that they were speaking out against the Vietnam War, against Chicanos going to fight in the Vietnam War at the time. So yeah, Corky Gonzalez had ties with Oakland. And I know one of the guys, his name is Juan Espinosa, who's from Oakland, who was basically the Oakland bodyguard for Corky Gonzalez when he was in Oakland.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone that knows their culture and knows their history, he's a big name in the Chicano community. So let's get to Oakland, man. Gritty, grimy,
Yeah.
Oakland, right? The town business.
Oakland.
Orale, Oakland for the homies in Oakland. You know what I mean? But let's get to where residing right there in the East Bay. You know, Oakland is just. I mean, it's the town. You know, it's the town, and it's known.
Sure.
And it's definitely everybody want to be like Oakland. So let's say 90s, man, 80s, 90s, you know, these barrios, these older barrios, and a lot of more hoods start kicking up dust, and you start noticing norteños out there, man. What was the atmosphere like when norteños started to hit the block?
Well, if I could go back a little bit, one of the first barrios in East Oakland during the Cholo era, which was in the 70s, was called Los Hermanos del Barrio. And a lot of cliques formed from that original gang. You also had the 38 locals, you had Barrio Oakland locals, you had 46 locals, you had Fruitvale Gangsters, you had Jingletown, East 7th Street, and various other barrios that came about. And originally it was just barrios. It was just hoods. They were fighting over different hoods. You had the 60s. That was another famous hood from the documentary Children of Violence. You had, what's the other one called? There were several hoods, 41st Cycles. And these were the original barrios of Oakland. And then in the late 80s and early 90s, you started seeing more of the Norteno influence coming from the Pintas. Now, I had heard from Rojo and from different people that had put a lot of info out there that there had already been regiments in Oakland going back to the 70s. But the Norte thing started becoming really big in the late 80s, early 90s in Oakland. Before that, it was mostly barrios. So I would say growing up in the 90s, especially around the Fruitvale area, the Doves, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the Norteno thing was really strong, bro. And a lot of the older barrios that I had mentioned had gravitated to become Norteños, like Quince. The 60s had become UNT. Fruitvale Gangsters became a Norteno gang. 36, 38 locals became Norteños. East 7th Street, and so forth. And yeah, man, it was a time when it was really powerful on the streets, and there was a lot of Norteno gangs in Oakland.
Yeah, you know, and being that you're homegrown right there in Oakland, and what I wanted to ask you, man, it's a question I've always wanted to ask you since we've ever been talking, man, was, you know, down in Los and LA, man, not quite as much, but, you know, there's always been some tension between the Africano community and the Chicano community. You know, there's always been that slight undertone of tension or whatever the case may be in certain pockets, certain areas. How was it in Oakland? Because I know Oakland's very diversive with a lot of Africanos, but there is a big Chicano presence. So how is it over there? Do they all get along, or is it beef? Or
I would say that it's not uncommon to see, how can I word it? It's not uncommon to see Raza and blacks get along in Oakland. It's not uncommon to even see an interracial couple in Oakland. But I would say there's kind of like a coexistence. That's the best way I could describe it. It's not perfect. Yeah, there is divisions. Yeah, there are African Americans who dislike Raza and vice versa. But there's this kind of respect and coexistence. Now, there have been problems in the past where, like, African Americans used to rob paisas and paleteros and stuff like that. And even some Norteños used to do it as well. But there have been little problems, and there have been fights between black gangs and Raza gangs in the past. But I don't think it was ever really like what you see in Southern California. There's always kind of this weird coexistence. That's the best way I could describe it, bro.
Yeah, no,
like this mutual respect.
Exactly. That's what I was going to touch on. That's exactly what I've seen. There's a respect factor there. You know, everybody's with the business in Oakland. And so and speaking of that, Oakland, you know, it's a city unlike any others. For anyone that doesn't know, you know, as far as Northern California and Southern California, Oakland is the town. And, you know, doing a lot of time, I've ran into a lot of Norteños, Sureños, as well as the Barrio Border Brothers in Oakland, and they all had a different swag. It was urbanly influenced, a lot different from, I would say, the Valle or Sacramento or Modesto, Fresno. What's that swag? Is that just growing up with the Africano community? You think they take that swag, or is it just something that Oakland has just done on their own?
Well, Oakland, the thing that's weird about Oakland is, like, if you look at the Chicanos of the past, they were very Chicano, bro. The Chicano movement was big in Oakland. The Cholo style, even the Pachuco style was big in the 40s and 50s. And, you know, the lowriders, the Dickies, the Ben Davis, the Pendletons, that was big in Oakland. But because Oakland had a large African community, African American community, let's take it back. In 1980, the African American community was 47% of the population. That was the largest it's ever gotten in Oakland. So that's almost 50%. That's almost half. So the Raza got a lot of influence from the African American community, especially a lot of musicians, a lot of artists, and et cetera, have come out of Oakland that are African Americans, the Black Panthers as well, political figures. So there was influence from the Black community in the Chicano community. But I would say the older Chicano community was very Chicano, bro. But I would say by the late 90s, 2000, it started to become very urban. But definitely people from Oakland have always had this urban stilo, this kind of unique stilo. I have it, and a lot of people I know have it. That makes us stand out whenever we're outside of Oakland.
Yeah, hey, one thing I could tell you about Oakland is you could tell, the Mackin is real in Oakland, from what I've been
Oh
told.
yeah,
The Mackin is very real in Oakland, and everyone consider themselves ladies' men, and if not ladies' men, they're trying to put the ladies out there for the other men. But either way,
hey,
the,
bro,
you know,
I'm a fat dude, and I am not afraid to spit game, bro. And I show it to my homies all the time.
oh,
That's
most
that Oakland game.
yeah, most definitely, man. Oakland's always been about their Mac game. Their Mac hand is very strong, right? Um,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. So let's get into the Sureño presence. The Sureño presence in Oakland. When did you start seeing these guys? Because I know they started planting their flags and they've been around. They've been around since the beginning, but you didn't really start noticing them into, I'd say, the 90s. Myself, from what history I know. But you're the man. You were right there. So, and I know being a non-gang member and not being your thing, you still have eyes, man. So what was happening around there with the Sureños?
Well, let me tap on that real quick. Yes, I was never really gang related. I was more of like an affiliate, or how can I say, like a sympathizer, I guess you could say, because my brother was a Norteno and all my homies in my barrio were Norteno. So I was cool with all the homeboys. It was always easy for me to get along with homeboys in other towns because of that. But going back to what you originally asked me, to talk about the Sureños, I got to go back a little bit to at least the 70s and 80s. My brother had told me that when he was young, there were what he called Paisa Cholo gangs, but they weren't Sureños. And he said there were actually, he would run into some dudes here and there that were from LA, but they were Cholos, but they weren't banging like Sud, but they would tell him, hey, I'm from LA. I just live out here in Oakland now. But my brother told me that there was a gang called Wino Park in Oakland that was mostly made up of Paisas. And there was another gang called Mojado Power at one point in Oakland, believe it or not. And it was a Paisa gang. But a lot of these gangs that gravitated originally to the Border Brothers, you didn't really see a Sureño presence until maybe the mid to late 90s and early 2000s. And that was, from what I know at least, that was a gang called Southside Locals. And they were around the area, around 57th Ave, around 53rd Ave, 57th, around that area. That was kind of where they dominated. But the thing about them, they were surrounded by the 60s, or UNT as they're called, and by the 40s and the dirty 30s areas. So they were kind of surrounded. But that was like the only real Sureño gang that I ever heard about in Oakland. And I'm no disrespect to them. There was a time when they were putting in work.
Oh yeah, most definitely. They're very prevalent in Richmond. Not to take anything away from the Norteños in Richmond.
Oh yeah.
But the Sureños are pretty prominent in the city of Richmond, most definitely. So let's move on from there, man. Let's move on from there. Let's get to the hyphy area, the hyphy era. Because there was a lot of Norteños and a lot of Africanos and a lot of everyone, man. Everyone was out there sideshowing. Everyone was out there, with their whips and shaking their dreads and everything. How was it being in Oakland in that era, man? I've always wanted to ask someone.
Well, I was already a little bit older in that era, but I used to kick it with some homies that were from that era, from East 7th Street. So I got to see that era a little bit, hanging out with them. They were a little bit younger than me, but we would go out to the sideshows, and I would just kind of peep out what the newer era was doing. It was wild, to say the least, bro. I mean, they took that whole going dumb, going retarded, going stupid to a whole new level, bro. I would say that's when the sideshows really blew up. They were always in Oakland, bro. Sideshows would go back all the way to the late 80s, bro. But I would say this era is when they blew up. The style started changing. Like I told you before, it was more Cholo style. You would see more dudes in bands and whatever. And this time you're starting to see dudes wearing gold grills, getting their hair braided, or having jerry curls, kind of like your homeboy from Minneapolis. And you started seeing like the long white tees and the going dumb and all that stuff, bro. And it really changed the game. It was a game changer in the town for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's when you started to see the more urban culture become big in with the Raza community in Oakland. And not just that, you started seeing a lot of Central Americans coming into Oakland, a lot of people from Guatemala, El Salvador. I myself am Salvadoran and Mexican. So that a lot of times they didn't identify with the Chicano style more. They identified to this new kind of urban culture that they landed on. So it was a mixture of a lot of things, bro. And it just seems like a lot of people gravitated to that era. Me personally, I wasn't into the hyphy music, but I remember it was a big thing. I remember everybody bumping it at the time. And yeah, it was a violent era too, bro. The crime went sky high in that era. That was the time when the Border Brothers, the Sureños, and the Norteños were going to war with each other, bro. And it was just death on the streets. That was around the same time the documentary Children of Violence, Gang Wars came out on Discovery Channel. So yeah, it was a pretty rough time, bro. It was crazy. I think a lot of the youth back then just took it to another level, bro. And that's when the violence just skyrocketed, bro. You were just seeing these crazy murders and automatic weapons were coming into the mix and all kinds of stuff, bro. It was a pretty wild era, to say the least.
Yeah. So basically, it was the coconut oil and Rogaine era.
basically,
the crazy story era. Yeah, according to him. So trip out. So so nowadays, bro. Nowadays, with everything going on in this world, and with the BLM movement, and then you got Chicanos starting to unite, the whole anti-hostilities in prison between Norteños and Sureños. You have a lot of Chicano movements as you push yourself and as I push myself towards unity for the raza and just for equality, social status of equality. How is it now out there in those Oakland streets? Is it still getting, I understand there's always going to be violence, there's always going to be gangs, but how is it as far as the community and the gente?
Well, I mean, I no longer live in Oakland. I still live in the East Bay, and I'm in Oakland all the time, and I observe what I see around me. Definitely, I see a big change now. It seems like there's more Central Americans, especially in the Fruitvale area. I still see Norteno and Sureño graffiti from time to time, but I don't really see homies hanging out like that like I used to. A lot of some of the youngsters tell me that it's still around, that there's still Norteños and there's still Sureños, and that there's a few Border Brothers around. But as far as like, do I see it? I don't see it as much, bro. I just see a lot of people trying to survive, especially with the gentrification going on of Oakland. The prices are going so sky high, and it's hard to live there to some degree because it's just so expensive there, bro. And you have a lot of gabachos moving in, buying up stuff, and it's a game changer, bro. So I think a lot of people are more about their money and they're trying to hustle and trying to survive in Oakland, bro, than in the past where they were gangbanging or killing each other over crack or whatever in the old days. I mean, some of that is still going on, bro. But I mean, there's still a lot of homicides out there. What they're attributed to, I'm not sure. But I know that there's still a lot of violence. So a lot of it has to be involved with either blacks fighting each other over drug turf or Raza fighting each other over gang stuff. But what's going on and who's active out there now, I don't know, bro. I'm really out of touch with what's going on today. But I would say the gentrification, the homeless encampments everywhere, a lot of homelessness in Oakland. I grew up in Oakland, bro, and I've never seen so many homeless people like I see now in Oakland, bro. I mean, it looks like a zombie apocalypse in some places in Oakland, bro. No lie.
Oh, no doubt about it. Yeah.
You're dealing with a lot of that now, and the Raza community has definitely grown in Oakland because a lot of blacks have been pushed out because of the gentrification. So I see a lot more Raza in areas that used to be mostly black in the past. But that Raza that's there, they're struggling to hang in there, bro, because it's getting tough out here and it's getting expensive.
Most definitely, Yeah, those homeless camps, they're getting real prevalent everywhere, man. In fact, I heard the one in Oakland, that's where Messy Marv's hanging out at. But one never knows, right? Hey, so trip out. I wanted to talk about one last thing, I've always wondered about. What was going on? What was the atmosphere? What was in the air, bro, when the Oscar Grant tragedy happened?
It's crazy you ask me that because at the time I was involved I was involved in like political organizing at the time, and we were part of the Oscar Grant protest. I was there when they had the big Oscar Grant protest. Matter of fact, the Oscar Grant protest was one of my first videos that reached the thousands in numbers because I filmed the Oscar Grant protest at the Fruit Belt Park. Now, Oscar Grant is originally from Hayward. He's actually not from Oakland, as previously believed. He grew up in Palmacia, which is in like towards the west end of Hayward. So he's from the Haystack. Yeah. And they were in San Francisco coming back from a New Year's party, and there was some kind of altercation on the BART. And the BART happened to stop at Fruit Belt Station, which is my barrio. I grew up in the Fruit Belt neighborhood, and which I'm pretty sure you know that's like the barrio of Oakland, Fruit Belt.
Almost definitely, yeah.
But basically what happened was when they got there, the BART police, because BART has the BART, those who don't know what BART is the subway system of the Bay Area. So it's kind of like our New York City subway kind of. And they have their own police force called BART Police. So when the BART got there, they had seen that there was an altercation. They pulled out Oscar Grant and their homies. Now, what happened after that was a travesty. I mean, dude was handcuffed on the ground. Whether he was resisting or not doesn't really matter. He was handcuffed and subdued. The cop just pulled out his gun. He shot him, execution style for no reason. And, those protests were dope. I would say they were dope because they were the only protests that I've seen that were against police brutality that involved black and brown people, bro. A lot of black and brown people united against that, and that was pretty dope, man. That was pretty dope. It wasn't co-opted by güeritos like some of the other protests that you see out there sometimes. And I think it was a lot of homegrown Oakland people who protested against that. So I would say the atmosphere was basically one of justice. People were angry. People were angry that the police, of police brutality in Oakland. And hey, I mean, the last police murders in Oakland have been Raza. Last year, they killed two Raza one Raza in Oakland and one in Vallejo. But yeah, man, it's one of those things, bro. It was powerful, bro. That's all I could really say. It was a powerful time when it came to organizing, protesting against police brutality. But I think it was more homegrown at that time, for sure.
Yeah, one thing I do know about Oakland is, man, when it comes to us against them, the gente in Oakland, whether it be Africano or Chicano, Mexicano, Raza, period, will stand up for theirs, most definitely.
For sure.
That's how Oakland's always been. Oakland, they might kill each other in the days, but at night, hey, you know what I mean? If it's us against them. So with that being said, man, I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate your time. Sure. I know you're a very busy man. Like I said, the historian of Oakland, this is the one Oakland Latinos United. This is the man to go to, for any of your history needs when it comes to the Bay Area, period. So, like I said, bro, if there's any last things you want to say out there to the gente, to the raza, to the people in general, man.
There's a lot of things I want to say, bro, but I'm going to try to condense it into something short if you give me the chance.
Handle it, bro. Handle it. It's your time.
So if you guys want to know more about the barrio history of Oakland, check out the documentary Children of Violence from 1982 about the Parkin family, about Barrio 60s, and you'll see when the Oakland Chicano barrios were first starting, and you'll see how that came about. It's on YouTube. Check that out. If you want to see what the Nortenos in Oakland looked like in the 80s, check out the movie The Principal from 1987, filmed in North Oakland. All the cholos that were on that movie were all homies from Oakland, from 36, from 38, and from 41st Cycles. That movie starred James Belushi and Louis Gossett Jr. and Ray Don Chong and Jacob Vargas and Isai Morales. Check out that movie, filmed in the town. And if you want to know anything about Oakland Chicano history, look up Oakland Wiki and type in Chicano, or hit me up on my IG, OaklandLatinosUnited.com, Oakland Latinos Unidos on IG, and you can hit me up and ask me any questions. I always answer my private messages. And I want to give a shout out to all the barrios in Oakland, man, to the Murdered Doves, the Dirty 30s, East 15th, 38, 36, Jingletown, East 7th Street, 41st, you know what I mean? The 60s, the 50s, even the DPs, even the Border Brothers, the Sureños, everybody out there, man, be safe and keep it Chicano, keep it Raza. And, hey, power to the people, Chicano power, and that's where I'm going to leave it. Town business.
Órale. Hey, gracias, my brother.
For sure, Gunner. Thank you for having me, and if you ever want to have me on the show, For anything else, I'm right there, brother.
No doubt about it. With that being said, Raza, I hope that you guys move fast with a purpose. That's called hustling. Remember, at the end of the day, it's all about uniting the Raza, North, South, Bulldogs, and everything in between, man. Hey, we got to go out there and get it for the gente. And that's all we can do. Bang, bang, the gun.